said before a little bit earlier, because memory is such a concept, it's a very abstract thing, there's lots of different models of memory because we actually can't be exactly sure how it exactly works because it's such a complex and abstract thing. So we do have another model of memory, which I believe, yes, is by Baddeley and Hitch, which is actually one of your case studies from 1974. And this is the working model of memory. So the working model of memory is what your working memory is the mental work that is occurring at any given time, including how the information that you're retrieving, how your brain problem solves, and how you comprehend all of the information around you. And it actually draws on the sensory and long-term memory. So it's also really interesting to be actively thinking about the parallels and differences between each of the memory stores and models, because that actually could be a question you got in exam. You see, for example, if we go back to our multi-store model of memory, you actually could be given an exam question that says, state one similarity or one difference between the multi-store model of memory and our working model of memory. One thing, for example, you could talk about is how in the working model of memory, our working memory is the mental work that's occurring at any given time, and how that's quite similar to the idea of short-term memory in our other model of memory. So there are 4 separate but interdependent aspects of working memory. So Baddeley and Hitch, Bailey, so I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that one right, came up with the working model of memory. And like I said before, that's the mental work that's occurring at any given time. So currently I'm thinking about the working model of memory. So that's what's in my working model of memory. Or if I was in biology learning about cells, I would be actively thinking about cells, which would be what would be occupying my working memory. So the central executive, the episodic buffer, visuospatial sketchpad, and our phonological loop are all interrelated parts of our working memory. So the first part of our working memory is our phonological loop. And then thinking about breaking our word down, we have phonological loop. Think phono, think phone, think talking on the phone, think phonemes, sound. We're thinking sound when we think phonological loop, because phono means hearing, and the phonological loop is therefore the auditory working memory. So the things that we're actively thinking about, the information, the sound information that's coming in when we're looking at memory through the lens of the working model of memory, is actually our phonological loop. So it's the storage of what we hear. So it's storage, and this storage is what helps us to understand and make sense of the sounds that are coming in. So for example, sentences that are longer than a few words, your phonological loop in the working model of memory actually is what's helping you to make sense of the sounds that you're hearing. The visuospatial sketchpad, think visual spatial, breaking down that word to kind of understand its meaning a bit more deeper. This is actually visual short-term memory, and it's actually what allows you to picture, for example, if you were to rearrange the furniture in a room. And the next up is our central executive, which our central executive, as you can see in this diagram, is actually the thing in the middle. It's what combines the information from our separate stores. So the central executive puts together the sound and vision of the working memory, and it actually controls our attention. So the central executive is responsible for shifting our attention between tasks, and it brings in the stimulus information from the phonological loop and the visuospatial sketchpad to make those decisions. So the 3 main functions of the central executive that we have are inhibition, which is actually an element of attention, which is screening out irrelevant material. So that's even another similarity to our sensory memory. In our other model of memory, our sensory memory is actually screening out the irrelevant material, whereas in this model, the central executive actually takes that role. So it's screening out the irrelevant material. That's inhibition. The next function of the central executive is switching, which, like I said before, it's responsible for controlling our attention. And the third one is updating. So as information is brought in from long-term memory or brought in from or into our working memory from the world around us, it actually updates information before recommitting them to memory through the episodic buffer. So say, for example, in maths, you're learning a new concept, you come to a lesson and your teacher teaches you something new about that concept. Your episodic buffer, let's explain the episodic buffer first. Your episodic buffer helps to retrieve information from long-term memory and associate it with information in working memory. So, for example, you come to your math lesson and you're learning about a math topic. Your episodic buffer will actually bring that prior knowledge that you have into your conscious awareness, which is your central executive. And as your phonological loop might be taking in and processing what your math teacher's telling you, maybe your visuospatial sketchpad's making sense of the writing or the symbols that the teacher's written on the board, the central executive is actually combining those two sensory inputs and is actually working with the information that's the episodic buffer has brought in from the long-term memory to actually process and make sense of and give meaning to all of that information. So that's our working model of memory. Again, could be a bit of a new idea or concept for a lot of people watching today. So if you have any questions, don't be afraid to put them in the chat box below. And yeah, I'll be more than happy to go through that a little bit more. But yes, that is our working model of memory.